For I'm Mark Sherman, and I cover the Supreme Court for the Association. Justice Clarence Thomas filed his annual disclosure report on Thursday, and in it, he acknowledged that he took 3 trips last year on a private plane owned by Republican businessman and donor Harlan Crow. This is the first time in years that Thomas has acknowledged receiving any hospitality from Crow. And it's significant for 2 other reasons. One of which is that it follows a series of reports in the spring by the investigative news site ProPublica that detailed years of travel and gifts that Crow has provided to Thomas and his wife, Ginny. And it also comes while principally Democrats in Congress are pressing the Supreme Court to adopt an ethics code. Thomas's report has some explanation for some of the travel, and it also corrects some omissions, which he says were inadvertent from prior years. So, for example, Thomas notes that until recently, the guidelines provided by the federal judiciary to judges did not require them to report certain types of travel. He says that has now changed, and so going forward, he will report the kinds of trips that he reported this year. Now, he did not report any of the trips he took in earlier years, but he did make other corrections to his report, including he acknowledged the real estate transaction in which Crow purchased the home in Savannah in which Thomas's mother still lives. Thomas and other relatives owned that house and a couple of adjacent properties. And in 2014, Crow bought them. Now, Thomas said he didn't report it at the time because he actually took a loss on the deal. He said he put enough money into the house that it did not, that when he eventually sold it, it did not turn a profit. Now, Thomas and Justice Samuel Alito both filed their reports on Thursday, which was nearly 3 months after their other 7 colleagues filed their reports. Thomas and Alito both requested 90-day extensions, which they were given, and so this is the date on which the judiciary posted those reports online and made them available to the public.
Yes, we are back here on Issues and Answers Friday. My Country with Scott Cannon, and as you hear, that is about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who has reported that he took 3 trips on a Republican donor's plane last year. This is from our friends over at the Associated Press. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is acknowledging that he took 3 trips last year aboard a private plane owned by Republican mega donor Harlan Crow. It's the first time in years that Thomas has reported receiving hospitality from Crow. In a report made public on Thursday, the 75-year-old justice said that he was complying with new guidelines from the federal judiciary for reporting travel, but did not include any earlier travel at Crow's expense, including a 2019 trip to Indonesia aboard the yacht owned by the wealthy businessman and benefactor of conservative causes. The filing comes amid a heightened focus on ethics and at the High Court that stemmed from a series of reports revealing that Thomas has for years received undisclosed expensive gifts, including international travel from Harlan Crow. Crow also purchased the house in Georgia where Thomas's mother continued to live and paid for 2 years of private school tuition for a child raised by Thomas and his wife, Jeannie. So this man purchased Clarence Thomas's mother's house and where she lives, and paid for 2 years of public school tuition for Thomas's, I guess, foster child or adoptive child in some way. But this shows you the state of our political system, of our judiciary. We count on people like Clarence Thomas to be the arbiter of justice in our society. And meanwhile, he is taking lots of gifts from somebody who has an interest in maintaining a status quo that is not beneficial to laborers, to the working class in general. Okay? So What you're looking at is the type of corruption, the legal corruption of the American justice and political system. That's what you're looking at right here. You are looking at what corruption in America looks like. And the sad thing is that they're all doing it on some level. And it's completely, for the most part, legal. As ProPublica also revealed that Justice Samuel Alito failed to disclose a private trip to Alaska that he took in 2008 that was paid for by two wealthy Republican donors, one of whom repeatedly had interest before the court. The AP also reported that Justice Sonia Sotomayor, aided by her staff, has advanced sales of her books through college visits over the past decades. Now, listen to this. Supreme Court justices do not have a binding code of ethics. They don't. They really don't. These are people who we look to rule on issues that will affect me, you, and everybody here. You know, some of the most famous cases in history: Brown versus Board of Education. Plessy Ferguson. You look at some of these big, historically grand, Obergefell, Roe v. Wade. If you look at these big issues, how can you have any confidence whatsoever that the Supreme Court will do their job and maintain a sort of fair and just order in this country when they can easily be manipulated with trips, with gifts at any time by anybody? And here's the thing that gets me. Not only do Supreme Justices not have a binding code of ethics, they have resisted the idea that they adopt one or have one imposed on them by Congress. Oh, really? Oh, well, I guess that's just it then, right? I guess we should just leave it up to them to decide whether they should have a code of ethics imposed on them. This is what I'm talking about right here. You want to know why I support people like Cordell West and don't support the two mainstream corporate parties? This is why. This is why right here. If we had a legal system, a political system in this society that functioned, there wouldn't be any debate whatsoever whether the people who are on our Supreme Court should have a code of ethics. They are literally in charge of everyone else's code of ethics. And they don't have one for themselves. How do you decide what is ethical when you have no code of ethics yourself? Can anybody tell me that? Now, in the spring, all 9 justices recently signed a statement of ethics that Chief Justice John Roberts provided to the State Judiciary Committee. He himself has acknowledged that the justices can do more to address ethical concerns. Well, that's mighty big of them. But neither the statement nor Roberts' comments assuaged Senate Democrats. The Democratic-controlled committee approved an ethics code for the court in July on a party line vote. The legislation has little chance of passing the Senate. It would need at least 9 GOP votes, and the Republicans have strongly opposed it, or the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. Now, here's how I would have looked at this a few years ago. I would have said, well, obviously the Republicans don't want a code of ethics and the Democrats do. what I realize is that now the Democrats and Republicans play this game called rotating villain. The rotating villain. Okay? The rotating villain is somebody who takes the blame for legislation not passing because they are in no real danger of being, say, kicked out of office. So the Senate Democrats can, because they are not in power currently, or they don't have, filibuster proof power, can pretend that they want an ethics code because they know that they don't have the votes to get it passed. So this is a game that we play with the Democratic Party on a lot of things. Whenever they're out of power or whenever they don't have a full majority, they start saying, oh yeah, I really want A, B, C, and D. And then the minute they get in power and they get like they had under Obama, filibuster proof majority, then they don't do anything about it then either. They just find, oh, Joe Manchin said we can't do it. Kristen Sinema said we can't do it, or whatever. They'll find some, back in the days it would be Joseph Lieberman. Oh, Joe Lieberman said we can't do this. I don't know what's wrong with him. He's a Democrat, but he acts more like a Republican. That Joe Lieberman. Like I said, now it's Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. Really what we have is a fully compromised political system and judiciary. Now, one trip that Clarence Thomas reported was to Crow's Lodge in the Adirondacks up in New York, where the investigative site ProPublica reported that Thomas visits every year. So this guy's at this guy's lodge every year. This guy's taking trips on his dime every year. These are the best buddies. I bet Clarence Thomas thinks he likes him for his sparkling personality. Now, the other two trips were to Dallas, where he spoke at conferences sponsored by the American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank. Clarence Thomas also noted court officials recommended that he avoid commercial travel for one of the trips in mid-May because of concerns about justices' security following the leak of the court's draft abortion opinion that overturned Roe v. Wade. The justice also belatedly acknowledged that Crow had purchased the home in Savannah, Georgia, where Clarence Thomas's mother still lives. Thomas and other family members own the house along with two neighboring properties. Now, the sale was completed in 2014, but Thomas said he erroneously thought he didn't have to report it because the sale resulted in a capital loss. So, ultimately, Clarence Thomas's mother is living in a house owned by this guy, Harlan Crow. In reporting that he and his wife will have assets worth $1.2 million to $2.7 million, Thomas also corrected several other mistakes from earlier reports. These include omissions of accounts of a credit union that last year were worth accounts at a credit union that were last year worth $100,000 to $250,000, and a life insurance policy in his wife's name that was valued at less than $100,000. Thomas is considering whether to amend prior reports. The annual financial reports for Thomas and Alito were released on Thursday, nearly 3 months after those of the other 7 justices. Thomas and Alito were granted 90-day extensions. Alito reported assets of $2.8 million to $7.4 million, while most of the holdings are in mutual funds. Alito retains shares of stocks in energy and other companies that sometimes force his withdrawal from Supreme Court cases. Why would you even be able to own in stocks if you're on the Supreme Court or in Congress? This is a question we've asked countless times before. why would somebody who is playing in the game also be one of the people who sets the rules in the game? Why do we as a society hold athletes? We are much more concerned with whether, you know, NFL players are taking steroids or whether they're betting on games than we are whether or not Supreme Court justices and senators and people in the House of Representatives and Congress people are literally betting on the stock market when they have the power to affect the stock market. That's far worse cheating than guys taking steroids in the NFL or gambling on football or basketball. But guess which one gets far more coverage when it happens? Now, Samuel Alito, in a column for the Wall Street Journal, said that he was under no obligation to report the Alaska trip or step aside from any cases involving the benefactor. Oh, well, that's nice to know. That's real nice to know. That these people have zero accountability. And not only that, they feel that they don't owe us an explanation for anything. The arrogance of these people. The sheer arrogance of these people. Whew. All right, folks. When I come back, we're going to get into the Happy Happies. We'll be right back here on WLTH 1370 AM.